The first time I made a throat cut, I was 9. My father's hands wrapped around mine, guiding the knife in one clean line. "Swift," he whispered. "Mercy lives in a swift hand." The hog shuddered. Steam rose. The trough filled red. That smell, iron and smoke, stayed with me like a chain around the heart. Years later, winter 1850 came down like iron on Bourbon County. The ground was stone. The sky was ash. And the new overseer, Silas Puett, walked the yard with cold blue eyes and a whip that spoke before his mouth did. He stepped into my smokehouse like a thief, touching my knives, calling me boy, promising lessons carved into skin. He kept his promise. The lash sang. My back burned. The fire in the pit hissed like it knew my name. I am Solomon the butcher. My knives have fed masters for years. Bacon, ham, sausage, nothing wasted. In the smoke and silence, a thought began to breathe. What if the animal one night was not a hog? Before we go any further, subscribe and comment your state below so this story of buried truth reaches more eyes. Some people say history is written by winners. I say it's written in blood, and blood remembers. On the coldest night, with the hogs starved and the moon turned away, a man entered my door for his final inspection. He thought he owned my hands. He did not know what they had decided. Tell me, when justice wears a butcher's apron, is it still justice? Bourbon County, Kentucky. The year was 1850. The kind of winter that cracked lips, split wood, and made every breath sting in your chest like swallowing glass. The Blackwell plantation sat there like a kingdom of tobacco and cruelty. Sprawling fields asleep under frost. Cabins huddled together like broken teeth. And at the center, the big house. White columns staring down on all of us like watchful eyes. I had lived on this land most of my life. Brought here as a boy with my mother, when old Master Thaddeus Blackwell bought us cheap from a failing Virginia farm. My father came later, sold for his skill with livestock. That man taught me everything. How to bleed an animal so the meat stayed sweet. How to cure ham through a long Kentucky winter. How to wield a knife not as a weapon, but as an instrument. When he collapsed one summer, fever burning him alive from the inside, the master denied him medicine. By the next dawn he was gone. I was 17 and the smokehouse became mine. That smokehouse was more than brick and mortar. It was sanctuary. The walls breathed hickory smoke. Hooks groaned under the weight of salted carcasses, and my knives sang against the sharpening stone. Out there in the fields, men broke under the overseer's lash. But inside that house of fire and meat, I had purpose. I had silence. Old Master Thaddeus was not kind, but he was practical. Slaves were investments to him, kept alive only to keep working. He let me rule my domain as long as the tables were full, and his hams fetched good prices. For years, I was left alone with my fire and steel, but even stone cracks under pressure. The crack came with his son, Gregory. He came home from Boston when his father's health turned sour. He brought fine clothes, soft hands, and something far worse, an overseer named Silas Puett, a wiry man with hair the color of rust and eyes like winter water. His voice was a blade, sharp and cold. The first time we met, frost crunched underfoot. I carried a basket of spices, minding my work, when he blocked my path. "You the butcher?" he asked, circling me like a hound sniffing meat. "Yes, sir," I answered, eyes lowered the way survival demands. "I hear you sleep in the smokehouse. Work alone. Don't seem right to me." "Master Thaddeus's orders," I said softly. "Well," he leaned close enough for me to smell the tobacco rotting on his breath. "Things are different now. I'll be watching you." From that moment, the air changed. He walked the plantation like a storm cloud. Whips cracked louder. The cabins fell silent. Children no longer laughed between chores. Fear seeped into every corner. And though my knives kept me apart from the fields, I felt his eyes on me. Measuring, waiting. I knew storms by their smell. My father once said a butcher must know when the air shifts, when the kill is coming. That morning, with frost underfoot and his shadow on mine, I smelled it. Something in Bourbon County was turning, and soon blood would follow. In 50 Kentucky, one butcher's trade, one overseer's cruelty. A storm begins. Would you have survived under Puett's whip? The coldest mornings always began with fire. I'd rise before dawn, strike flint to steel, and coax flame into the smokehouse pit. The wood hissed, the smoke curled, and I'd sharpen my knives in the half-dark. Steel against stone. That rhythm steadied my thoughts like prayer beads. It was on such a morning that Master Gregory walked in, boots polished, Boston accent sharp as a file. Silas Pruitt trailed behind him like a shadow with teeth. "We're slaughtering 4 hogs today," Gregory said. "Father wants extra meat for guests." I nodded. "Yes, Master." "I'll need more hands." "You've got 2 already," Pruitt cut in. His lips twisted into something between a smirk and a sneer. "Make do." I swallowed my protest. In butchering, haste breeds rot. But there was no arguing with men who thought your silence was your only virtue. By noon, 3 hogs hung bled and clean. The 4th was a brute, near 400 pounds, mean-eyed with a squeal like a knife through tin. My helpers, Isaiah and Micah, wrestled the ropes while I raised the blade. The cut must be swift, true, merciful. But the hog jerked at the last instant. Isaiah slipped, and my knife slid wrong. The wound was shallow. The beast thrashed, screaming like a child, spraying hot blood across the packed earth. The boar charged, knocking Pruitt flat in the mud. His fine coat turned red. I lunged, drove steel deep into the jugular, and the animal dropped twitching at his feet. For a moment, silence reigned. Then Pruitt rose, trembling with rage. "You did that on purpose." "No, sir," I said, chest heaving. "It was an accident." His fist cracked across my face. The second blow caved my ribs. I did not raise a hand. To strike back meant death. "You think you're special? Because you cut meat while the others cut cane." His eyes blazed as he coiled the whip from his belt. "Take off your shirt." The smokehouse froze around me. My sanctuary turned to gallows. I peeled blood-soaked cloth from my back, skin raw to the air. The lash sang. First strike split flesh, second carved across. By the 5th I counted no more. Only fire, only blood. He carved lines into me until I sagged to my knees, my breath a ragged rasp. At last he crouched low, gripping my chin in his red-stained hand. "You're nothing. Just another body. Remember that." Then he left me bleeding in the muck. 4 carcasses hanging like silent witnesses. I stayed on the ground a long time. My father's voice whispering through the haze. A good butcher brings death swift, not slow. That night, knife in hand, I cut flesh and bone by lamplight. My back burned, my hands moved steady, and in the smoke another thought began to breathe. One day the blade would turn, blood on the smokehouse floor. A lesson in pain becomes a vow of revenge. If freedom cost blood, would you pay it? The lash healed slow. Each movement reopened the wounds. Each shift of muscle tore at the scabs. But pain became its own language, one I learned to speak in silence. I worked with my back on fire, hanging carcasses, stoking the smoke, sharpening the knives. Silas Pruitt was not content with one lesson. He returned again and again, inventing faults where none existed. "Too much salt in the brine," he said, and 10 lashes followed. A steer took too long to die under the blade, 15 lashes. Each stroke was delivered in the smokehouse, as though he understood it was my only refuge, and wanted to poison it with blood and fear. The plantation bent under him like a forest in storm. The field hands came back at dusk with fresh welts on their backs. House slaves moved like ghosts, silent and hollow-eyed. Even the children's laughter died, smothered by his shadow. And yet I endured. I lowered my eyes, answered softly, obeyed every command. To Pruitt it looked like submission. In truth it was study. I learned his habits. His nightly rounds always ended with whiskey, the bottle never far from his hand. I marked how he carried his money in a leather pouch, tucked into his left boot, patting it now and then like a man checking his pulse. I noted how his cruelty was not random but deliberate, measured like a butcher's cut. He took Esther, barely 14, into the big house. Within days her eyes went glassy, her skin scrubbed raw each morning at the creek. Old Joseph, the carpenter, offered advice on a wheel repair. Pruitt made him kneel in snow until his toes blackened and rotted. Martha, heavy with child, stumbled with water buckets. He struck her down. That night she lost the baby. Each cruelty was another stone added to the scale inside me. I bore them all in silence. My face showed nothing, but my heart carved the memory of each lash, each cry, each grave. Pruitt wanted to break me. He wanted the day when my spirit would collapse and leave behind only a shell, breathing but empty. I had seen it happen to others, a death of the soul long before the body followed. But he would not see that moment in me. My silence was not surrender. It was sharpening. Every injustice honed the edge. Every scream fueled the fire. And in the smokehouse, where blood dripped from hooks and knives whispered against stone, I carried a secret vow. Silas Pewitt would die by my hand. Not swiftly, not mercifully, but with the precision of a butcher who knows that every cut has its place, and nothing should be wasted. Every lash was another stroke of the knife sharpening in my mind. Do you think silence is strength or surrender? They came for Thomas in the gray of morning, when the world still wore the bruise of night, and the creek breathed steam into the cold. The boy was 10, small as a mite, and twice as quick with a laugh. He belonged to Isaiah, hard hands, kinder eyes, the man who had helped me corner the biggest hogs and keep my knives true. Thomas liked to help in the dairy, balancing pails like he was practicing for a future that didn't exist for us. That morning, a pail of milk tipped. Curiosity, clumsiness, call it what you like. He had heard the spill and came out like a dog scenting a bone. His voice cut across the yard. The crack of the whip answered before he arrived. He dragged the child by the collar, small feet slapping the frozen ground, and fastened him to the post with the same casual brutality he used to tie down a steer. Isaiah fell to his knees in the mud, hands pleading, tears cutting clean tracks down a face that never had the right to weep. Please, sir, he begged. It was the boy. I'll take it. Give me the lashes. But the overseer wanted a spectacle, wanted the lesson carved into skin for everyone to read. I heard the child's voice, a raw sound like a small animal in a trap, and something inside me broke. Not in the way of body fractures, but like a crack spreading through a dam. All the pain I'd stowed, every lash that had taught me to lower my head, all the stolen nights of sleep, everything poured out in a single hot river of contempt. I stepped forward before thinking. The yard blurred at the edges. My fingers were numb, but my mouth was clear. Sir, I said. Not loud, quiet works better in a room full of knives, but enough to cut the hush. It was my fault. The boy was helping me. Let me take his place? Pewitt's face flickered with something that wasn't surprise so much as hungry amusement. He spat on the earth, as men do when they want to erase a life's worth of debt. If it isn't the high and mighty butcher, he sneered. Fine, you want to be noble? We'll make an example. He doubled the lashes, 20 strikes. Cold bit into my back like 1,000 needles. Each lash was a promise of pain, a punctuation mark scored into flesh. I counted only to keep track, then stopped because numbers were meaningless against fire. When the whipping stopped, I was on my knees, blood slick under me and the smokehouse door bearing down with its usual smell of hickory and salt. But I did not break. The pain was a compass now, pointing me toward something I had already decided. My father's whisper returned. Mercy lives in a swift hand. Only this mercy would be mine to give or withhold. That night, while the plantation slept under a sky without stars, I set tools in order. I sharpened blades until the steel hummed like a caged thing. I checked the locks on the pen gates and counted the hogs, noting which were the hungriest, which stirred when I tapped the trough. I moved with a surgeon's calm, each ritual of preparation taking the edge off the ache in my back and feeding the cold calculus in my head. Isaiah and Micah watched me work. They said little. Men who have felt the whip do not trade stories in daylight, but Isaiah's eyes held gratitude, a small, fierce light that steadied me more than any prayer. He knew the boy was safe because I had chosen to take what he could not bear. He knew perhaps that a line had been crossed. I slept little that night. When I closed my eyes, I saw the boy in my mind, small, alive still. I saw Pewitt's booted gait, his hand on the whip, the way he chuckled at misery. I saw the smokehouse rafters and my father's face in the flicker. All these images knit into a single, terrible pattern. When morning came, the plan moved from thought to action, but the seed had been planted long before. Not in hatred alone, but in protection. The boy's cry had been the last straw that turned waiting into a decision. The butcher had become more than a tradesman. He had become the keeper of an oath, a child's cries, a man's resolve, one overseer's fate sealed. Would you have stepped forward for that boy? After the lashes for Thomas, the days grew colder, but my thoughts grew sharper. Pain no longer clouded me. It clarified me. I woke before dawn, lit the fires, salted the meat, and carried out every duty with the same quiet obedience I'd always shown. To Pewitt, I was broken. To myself, I was building. The smokehouse became a forge, not for steel but for resolve. Every knife I honed was not just for pork and beef. Each stroke on the stone whispered of another purpose. I studied my tools as a man studies scripture. The boning knife, thin, precise. The cleaver, heavy, final. The hooks and ropes, meant to suspend hogs but strong enough to hold other weights. I starved the hogs for days, giving them just enough to keep them restless. Their eyes followed every movement when I neared the pen, their grunts louder, more desperate. I knew their hunger would be my accomplice. Hunger makes beasts fierce, and pigs are not choosy about what fills their bellies. Isaiah and Micah noticed the change in me. They said little, but their silence carried weight. They worked harder, moving with purpose beside me. When their hands brushed mine, passing knives or buckets, there was an unspoken understanding. Something was coming. Each night, I replayed Puit's steps in my mind. He ended his evenings drunk, his boots crunching across the frost, always circling back to the smokehouse for one last inspection. It was pride. He wanted to see if his lash had bled the obedience he craved. He never imagined that in my silence I was carving his death. The plan was simple because simplicity survives scrutiny. Lure him inside on slaughter night. Tools at the ready. Meat already hanging. Fire already fed. A cleaver near the workbench hidden by shadows. Then, one blow, not swift enough to be merciful, but true enough to end him. The rest would be craft. Butchery was the only trade I had been given, and now it would be my rebellion. At times, fear tried to rise in me. The whip had taught me what punishment meant. Discovery would be worse, but fear was met with another thought. The boy's thin wrists bound to the post, his cries swallowed by the winter air, Martha's blood in the dirt, Joseph's ruined feet, Esther's haunted eyes. These were debts, and debts must be paid. When I lay on my pallet in the smokehouse, listening to the hogs shift and grunt outside, I whispered to the dark, "The next blood spilled here will not be mine." The fires hissed in answer, sparks drifting upward like spirits carrying my oath. I no longer belonged to the Blackwells. I belonged to the plan, 6 hogs fattened, 1 man marked for slaughter. Would you wait or strike? The night came draped in silence, the kind that presses down until even the crickets refuse to sing. The hogs had already been bled, scraped, and strung by dusk. Their bodies swayed from the rafters like pale, eyeless witnesses, each one a mirror of what was about to happen. The fire pit glowed low, casting red light across the brick walls, turning the smokehouse into a furnace of shadows. I worked methodically, cleaning blades, wiping blood, arranging tools where my hand would know them even in the dark. On the bench, I left the cleaver half hidden beneath a folded cloth. Its edge gleamed whenever the fire cracked. I knew he would come. He had never failed his nightly inspection. He needed to remind me whose shadow I lived under. So I waited, every sense tuned like a string about to snap. The hogs outside grunted restlessly, their hunger loud in the stillness. Then, boots in the mud. The door groaned open. Cold night air slid across the smoke and fire. Silas Puit stepped in, whip hanging from his belt, bottle of whiskey in hand, his smirk as sharp as the knives on my wall. "Still working, butcher?" His voice mocked, glancing at the carcasses. "Or hiding from the cold?" I bowed my head. "Just finishing up, sir. Wanted everything perfect for the Blackwell's table." He paced slowly, trailing a hand across a rack of ribs, smearing grease on his fine coat. "At least you've learned your place. Took a beating or two, but now you understand." I met his words with silence, but inside, I knew. He was the one who didn't understand. Perhaps it was the way I stood or the calm in my voice when I finally spoke. "Yes, sir," I said softly. "I understand perfectly now." His eyes narrowed. Suspicion flickered. His hand dropped toward the whip, but it was already too late. My body moved with the precision of every slaughter I had ever performed. The cleaver slid from beneath the cloth and I closed the distance in 2 strides. The first blow struck his shoulder, not fatal, but staggering. His mouth opened, ready to call for help, but my second swing found its mark. Steel kissed his throat with the same merciless precision I once reserved for hogs. Blood erupted, hot and bright against my face, spattering the floor in arcs. He gurgled, clutched his neck, stumbled against the hanging carcasses. His body convulsed like the animals I had slaughtered so many times before. The sound was wet, human, and final. I watched him collapse. No frenzy, no chaos. Only the calm of a craftsman at his work. The fire hissed as droplets struck the coals. His blue eyes dimmed and silence reclaimed the smokehouse. Then came the second half of my trade, the butchering. I stripped him of his clothes, set my knife to flesh, and worked with the same steady hand my father had taught me. Muscle from bone, limb from torso. Each cut was measured, efficient, no different than hog or steer. By the end, there was no overseer, no man, only meat. I gathered the remains into the trough, the same vessel I used to carry slop to the hogs. Their hunger would ensure no trace remained. Tonight, the pigs would feast on more than scraps. I wiped the blade, steady, calm. My father's words whispered again. A good butcher brings death swift, not slow. The lesson was complete. One butcher, one overseer, one trough of swine. Was this justice or damnation? The hogs grunted in frenzy as I emptied the trough. Flesh, bone, and blood tumbled in, and the animals fell upon it with a hunger that shook the ground beneath their hooves. Their jaws cracked through bone like kindling. Their snouts slick with red as they tore and fought. By dawn, nothing would remain but the echo of grunts and the fattened bellies of beasts destined for slaughter themselves. I scrubbed the smokehouse floor until my hands burned raw. Straw soaked with blood went into the fire. Boots cut into pieces fed to the coals. Leather pouch buried deep where I had loosened the earth days before. His clothes vanished into smoke. His belt and buckle blackened in flame. The smell of charred leather and iron mingled with hickory, masking the stench of what I had done. By the time the first rooster crowed, there was no trace. The hooks bore only hog carcasses. The benches gleamed with steel ready for work. And I, Solomon, stood in the smokehouse like any other dawn, blood-stained, tired, but steady. When Isaiah and Micah arrived, I greeted them as though nothing had happened. Their eyes scanned me, searching for something. But they found only the same butcher they had always known. They asked no questions. Perhaps they already guessed. Silence was the language of survival. By mid-morning, Master Gregory came storming across the yard. "Where is Puit?" he demanded, voice sharp, irritation burning behind his eyes. He searched the overseer's cabin, the stables, the outbuildings. Horses were saddled, men rode out to scour the land. Slaves were questioned. Their eyes cast downward, answers soft and hollow. I kept to my routine, trimming fat, stirring brine, stoking the fires. When asked, I said plainly, "He came by last night, sir. Checked the meat. Seemed satisfied. Then left." My voice betrayed nothing. By nightfall, panic rippled through the plantation. Rumors sprouted like weeds in a field left untended. Some said he had run off with stolen wages, drunk and greedy. Others whispered he had fallen to wild animals in the forest. The boldest spoke of spirits, that the devil had claimed him for the cruelties he'd sown. No one looked to me. Solomon the butcher, quiet, dutiful, reliable. Who would suspect the man who salted their hams and carved their Sunday roasts? Yet inside me something shifted. The smokehouse no longer smelled only of meat and hickory. It carried the weight of a secret, heavy as iron chains. I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And still I felt no fear. No guilt, only calm. The lash had marked my body, but this act had marked my soul. The balance had been struck. That night, as the plantation tossed in unrest, I lay on my pallet listening to the hogs snoring in the pen, bellies full. The overseer who had broken so many had been broken himself, fed back into the cycle he once commanded. By dawn, there would be nothing left of him. No bones, no grave. No name spoken except in whispers. The man was gone. The legend was being born. The man was gone. The legend was born. Do you think secrets can stay buried? Days turned to weeks, and still there was no sign of Silas Puit. Riders searched the back roads. Neighbors were questioned. Creek beds and ravines were combed with lantern light. Nothing. He had vanished as though swallowed by the earth itself. At first, Master Gregory raged. His voice cracked across the yard louder than any whip, calling his overseer a coward, a thief, a drunkard. But as time passed and no body, no trace, no clue appeared, even his fury cooled into something darker. Unease. The Blackwells hired a new overseer, a stiff man named Peterson, strict but not cruel. Yet the shadow of Puit's disappearance lingered over every corner of the plantation like a fog. Among the slaves, whispers carried faster than smoke. They said the hogs had eaten him, that his screams had mixed with theirs in the smokehouse one winter night. They said his blood stained the walls, though no eye could see it. Some claimed spirits had dragged him into the pen as punishment for the pain he dealt. Nobody dared speak it loud, but every man, woman, and child knew. Silas Pewitt had met a fate fit for his own cruelty. I never confirmed, never denied. I kept my knives sharp, my eyes lowered, my voice soft. And yet something had changed. Where once backs bent low, now shoulders straightened ever so slightly. Eyes met mine longer than before, carrying a new weight. A question, a respect, a flicker of hope. The whites felt it too. Masters looked twice at their slaves, suspicion creeping where arrogance once reigned. Overseers on neighboring plantations heard the tale and scoffed in daylight. But at night, their hands lingered near their pistols and their eyes searched the shadows. Fear had shifted its direction. For once it was theirs. The story traveled beyond Bourbon County, carried in hushed voices by traveling slaves, passed down the line in coded songs and murmured prayers. Each retelling grew sharper, more terrible. Some said his bones were still rattling in the hog pen. Others swore the hogs had turned mean, their eyes glowing red at night with the overseer's cursed spirit inside them. It didn't matter whether they believed the truth. Legends are stronger than facts. Legends don't need proof, they need fear. And fear, I learned, could cut chains just as sharp as any blade. For me, the nights grew quieter. I no longer woke to the phantom sting of the whip. My wounds healed into scars, but my mind felt light, unshackled by dread. Still, the butcher's work continued. Smokehouse fires, salted hams, knives against stone. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Inwardly, everything had. Each time I walked past the hog pen, I thought of how they had torn Pewitt apart, how their hunger had erased every trace. The overseer who once carried himself like iron had ended as meat, no different from the animals he commanded me to kill. And I understood something then. Men who build their power on cruelty are more fragile than they believe. All it takes is one knife, one night, one vow. The legend spread because it had to. It was not just about me or about Pewitt. It was about a message. That even here, in the heart of slavery, the whip was not the only hand that could strike. Fear changed Master's eyes. A balance shifted. Do you believe fear is stronger than chains? Spring crept into Kentucky with a thaw that turned the earth to mud and the air to breathless damp. On the surface, the plantation settled back into routine. Peterson, the new overseer, was a man of few words. His discipline was firm, but lacked the venom Pewitt had poured into every act. To the Blackwells, this return to order was comfort, but beneath it, the whispers grew louder. One evening, fetching water near the well, I overheard two field hands, Marcus and Jonah, speaking in voices low as the rustle of leaves. They say there's men, conductors they call 'em, Marcus whispered, glancing around. Take you north. Hide you in safe houses all the way to Canada. Jonah shook his head. That's just stories. You speak that talk, you'll find yourself whipped or worse. My cousin made it, Marcus insisted. Sent word back through a preacher. Canada, free soil. Said the stars led him. I didn't step into their circle, but the words lodged deep inside me. Conductors, roots, Canada. For the first time, I imagined a road beyond the smokehouse, beyond the tobacco fields, beyond Kentucky itself. That night I pried up the loose brick beneath my pallet. The leather pouch was still there, heavy with the wages I had taken from Pewitt's boot. $47 and some change. A fortune for a man who officially owned nothing. I had buried it with no plan, only a knowing that it would matter someday. Now it whispered of possibility, but freedom was more than miles traveled. It was risk. Capture meant the whip, the stocks, or worse. Not just for me, but for every soul who followed. Could I lead them north only to watch them die in rivers and swamps? Could I leave behind Isaiah, Micah, young Thomas, the people who had come to look at me with eyes that held more than fear? For weeks I carried these questions like stones in my chest. I worked the knives with the same steady hands, salted meat with the same precision. But my thoughts reached northward, past the horizon, to a land I had never seen. The whispers returned again, this time from a housemaid cleaning the dining hall. She spoke of Quakers, white folks said to shelter runaways. She spoke of coded songs, lanterns in windows, and the North Star as a compass. Each whisper was like another cut in the rope tying me to Blackwell land. I felt the bond fray. I remembered Puett's blood soaking the floor. I remembered the look on Master Gregory's face when his suspicion grew, his drunken threats slurred in the smokehouse doorway. They would not stop until they ground me down, until every spark of defiance was beaten from me. Unless I left, unless we all left, the legend of Puett's death had already sown fear among the masters. But fear was not enough. It was time to turn whispers into action. That night, as the hogs shifted in their pen and the smoke curled up to a star-choked sky, I whispered a vow into the silence. I will not die here. I will not die a slave. If the road north is blood and fire, then I will walk it. Whips no longer bound me. Whispers called me north. Would you risk everything for freedom? By April, Master Thaddeus had grown too sick to leave his bed. That left Gregory in charge, and whiskey ruled him more than sense. His eyes, always red, watched me like a hound's. He never said it plain. But I knew. He suspected I had a hand in Puett's disappearance. One night, long after the lamps in the big house dimmed, I was gathering supplies from the smokehouse. Salt pork wrapped in cloth, smoked ham, a skin of water. The money from Puett's boot was hidden in my pack. Isaiah and I had arranged everything. Roots, safe houses. A Quaker farmer waiting near the edge of Blackwell land. The others were ready. 23 souls, men and women, children and elders, prepared to vanish into the night. Then I heard the sound. Boots in the mud, heavy, staggering. Gregory stepped into the doorway, shotgun cradled in his arms. His face was flushed, breath thick with drink. I knew it, he slurred, eyes narrowing. You've been planning something. You and the others. I froze, knife hidden in my sleeve. Where are they? He demanded. Don't lie. I saw shadows slip into the trees. His shotgun lifted, the muzzle aimed at my chest. My mind raced. One wrong move, and I'd be meat on my own floor. You'll never get away, he hissed. You'll be hunted down, brought back in chains. But I'll deal with you now, I forced my voice calm. If you kill me, Master, you'll lose your butcher. Who will prepare your hams, Peterson? He can't tell shoulder from shank. For a moment, his drunken eyes flickered with doubt. He hesitated, lowering the barrel just enough. Then show me. Show me where they've gone, I nodded slow. Not far. They're waiting for me before they move on. I can take you. Greed and pride guided him more than caution. He followed as I led him through the woods, his boots loud on the damp ground, his shotgun still trained close. The night hummed with frogs and owls. Above us, the North Star burned steady, guiding more than just me. We reached the clearing by a fallen oak, the place where the others had gathered hours earlier. Gregory's breath quickened, eyes searching the shadows. Where are they? Demanded, stepping ahead, his gun now pointed into the dark. That was the moment. The knife slid from my sleeve into my hand, an extension of my arm, my will, my vow. In one motion, I stepped close and drew the blade across his throat. The sound was wet, shocked, almost disbelieving. He dropped the shotgun, clutching his neck as blood poured between his fingers. His eyes met mine, wide, accusing, afraid. This is for every lash, I whispered. For every child sold, every woman broken, every life stolen. He gurgled, knees buckling, then toppled into the leaves. The forest drank his blood and the night swallowed his last breath. Unlike Puett, I did not butcher Gregory. I left him for the earth, for the crows, for whatever creatures would carry away his bones. Some deaths deserved silence, not craft. I wiped my knife clean on his coat and turned back toward the path. Ahead, the others waited in the dark, trusting me to lead them. Behind, the last Blackwell who claimed authority over me lay lifeless in the mud. The way north was open. One master gone. One road to freedom opens. Would you have spared Gregory or cut him down? We left Blackwell land in silence, 23 souls moving like shadows through the Kentucky woods. No chains clinked, no voices rose. Only the crack of twigs beneath tired feet, and the hush of the wind carried us north. Behind us lay the cabins, the big house, the smokehouse, and Gregory's blood soaking into the dirt. Ahead, the promise of freedom, and the certainty of danger. For 5 nights, we moved only under the stars. The North Star was our compass, Isaiah's whispered directions our map. By day, we hid in hollows, barns, or swamps. Children pressed against their mothers' chests to keep their cries muffled. Hunger gnawed, but we pressed on, each mile another shackle loosening. At last we reached the Ohio River. It stretched before us, dark and wide, its waters swollen with spring flood. Beyond it lay Ohio soil, no true safety under the Fugitive Slave Act, but the first step out of Kentucky's grasp. We expected a ferryman, a free black man who'd been paid to help us cross. Instead, we found his camp abandoned, a kettle overturned, hoofprints gouged in the mud. Slave catchers had gotten to him first. Panic rippled through the group. Children whimpered. The elders prayed. Without a boat, we were trapped on the wrong shore. It was Micah who spotted it, a flatboat moored downstream, likely a farmer's craft, broad and heavy, meant for hauling goods to market. We stole through the brush and freed it from its chain. The river grabbed us the moment we pushed off, the current pulling like a hungry hand. Isaiah and I worked the poles, straining to steer the loaded craft across the black water. 23 people huddled low, every creak of the wood a threat to tip us under. Halfway across, disaster struck. A submerged log slammed the boat's side. Water sloshed over the edge, children screamed, and Isaiah lost his pole to the current. I shouted above the roar, "Hold steady!" Grip tight. We fought to keep the craft from capsizing, spinning in slow circles as the current dragged us downstream. And then voices. Lantern light flared behind us on the Kentucky shore. The baying of hounds cut the night like knives. Slave catchers? They had found our trail. Their boat launched, 3 men inside, the glow of their lamp drawing closer with each heartbeat. Fear surged through our group like a fever. Mothers clutched children. Men whispered prayers. "Get ready," I said, pushing with all my strength toward a tangle of fallen trees near the northern bank. "When we hit, climb. Don't wait, just go." The boat struck the trees hard, nearly throwing us into the river. Branches clawed at us, but they gave us purchase. One by one, hands grabbed, bodies hauled. Children passed from arm to arm. Isaiah pulled Thomas to safety, then turned back for the others. I stayed until the last child was ashore. Behind me, the slave catcher's lantern blazed closer, their shouts echoing across the water. I freed the flatboat, shoving it back into the current, and faced the river with only my knife in the dark. Their boat closed fast. I could see their grins, hear the scrape of their oars. They thought us cornered prey, but I was a butcher. And I still had work to do. The Ohio River, freedom's blood-soaked crossing. Would you have rowed into danger or fled? Their lantern cut a gold line across the water as the slave catchers closed in. 3 men, 2 with oars, 1 with a rifle raised. I pushed off from the tangle of trees, steering my small craft straight at them. They thought me mad. In truth, I was ready. The boats collided with a crack of wood, the rifle firing harmless into the air. I leapt aboard their craft, knife flashing in firelight. What followed was not battle, but butchery. 3 men against 1. But I had surprise, hunger, and a lifetime of precision in my hand. My blade found throats and bellies with the same clean certainty I once reserved for hogs. Their shouts turned to gurgles. Their oars dropped into the current. Within minutes, the Ohio swallowed their blood. When it was done, I scuttled both boats, slipping into the river's black mouth. Cold water pulled me down, then released me onto the northern shore. The forest rose dark and endless above me. I followed the others' trail until I found them huddled in a clearing, eyes wide with fear. Isaiah's face broke when he saw me. No one asked questions. Some burdens are too heavy for words. From there, we pressed north. Safe houses, barns, Quaker homes, all whispered sanctuaries along the Underground Railroad. We walked by night, hid by day, guided by songs and stars. The children grew thin, the elders stumbled, but none turned back. At last, we reached the Detroit River. Across that final stretch of water lay Windsor, Canada, soil where no law of man could chain us. We crossed in silence, the current tugging like hands of the past, until at last our feet struck foreign ground. Free ground. Some stayed in Detroit. Others, like Isaiah and young Thomas, pressed on with me into Canada. Freedom was not easy. Cold winters, empty bellies, hard labor. But hunger and freedom is sweeter than feasts and bondage. I found work in a slaughterhouse, the same trade. But for the first time, the knives were mine to wield for myself. Each wage I earned was proof I belonged to no man. Yet the past followed in whispers. Kentucky, they said the butcher had carved up Silas Pruitt and fed him to the hogs. Overseers spoke the tale in hushed tones, warning one another to watch their step. Some swore the hogs at Blackwell's plantation grew mean afterward, that they carried his spirit in their eyes. Others said the devil himself dragged Pruitt away. The truth mattered less than the fear, and so the legend lived. The Butcher of Kentucky, a name spoken with dread among masters, with quiet pride among the enslaved. Fear had changed hands. Years passed. I grew old in Windsor. I watched children born free chase each other in the snow, their laughter a sound I once thought lost to this world. When the Civil War came and the chains finally broke in America, I drank whiskey alone and thought of every lash, every grave, every drop of blood that bought that freedom. Now I tell you this, freedom always has a price. I paid it in blood and smoke. Some call it damnation. I call it balance. I was Solomon, the butcher. And though my knives are long set down, the story remains. Freedom won, a legend born. The Butcher of Kentucky lives in whispers still. Do you think history remembers truth, or only the stories that frighten us most?